Hi, everyone. My name's Greg Knight.
And I'm Ricardo Avila.
The Popping Collars marketing department has let Ricardo and I know that we have a problem with attracting and retaining younger listeners. You know, because we're old.
So we've recently purchased a Zoom Millennial Translator for our podcast promos so that young people will finally know what we're talking about. Let's fire up.
Since we're the longest running Episcopal podcast, we have a lot of shows sitting in our archives.
Stop the cap. You are straight up wildin'. All that mid stuff is TLDR.
That's why we have the PC side pod Take 2, which allows us to go back and reevaluate some of our past episodes.
Leo pointing meme. Stop gaslighting me, bro. You're trying to red pill me right now with this Finsta account. I don't even know what that is.
Oh, God.
I don't even understand. What is Leo pointing meme?
For real, we haven't always had the greatest takes in the world, and some pop culture has shifted pretty significantly. Take 2 gives us the chance to admit where we made mistakes and highlight how pop culture has evolved over the last couple of years.
I was today years old when I learned about this. I apologize. I was not familiar with your game. You got that dog in you. NGL. I did not have this on my 2023 bingo card.
Oh, man. So check out Take 2 right here on the Popping Collars feed and relive our wisdom and more frequently our embarrassment firsthand.
This is fine. We live in a society. Chef's kiss. I was this close to rage quitting, but this idea is pretty grammable. Y'all are the GOAT Episcopod. GOAT Episcopod.
Okay, Ricardo, we can turn off the translator and head off to lunch now.
I could go beast mode on some food right now. TTYL, peeps.
We may have a problem.
What is TTYL?
Talk to you later.
Oh, for God's sake.
Everyone, my name is Greg Knight, and I like watching, thinking about, and talking about movies. One of the great things about starting your own podcast is that there are some days where you actually get to talk to the creators of those movies, and this is one of those days. This month, I got the chance to talk to Jesse Moss and Amanda McBaine, the directors of the documentary Girls' State. Letterboxd.com will ask you, what would American democracy look like in the hands of teenage girls? In this documentary, young female leaders from wildly different backgrounds in Missouri navigate an immersive experiment to build a government from the ground up. What I'll tell you is that this is the follow-up to the very successful documentary Boys' State. And just like in that film, young people put together a mock government over the course of a week-long summer camp, revealing how young people see the role of politics in their lives. They're also teenagers, so they do very teenagery things along the way. So what happens when a film crew follows a new generation of young people as they learn more about the joys and perils of civic life? Find out as I keep things under the stole with Jesse Moss and Amanda McBaine. But before we chat, here's a trailer for the movie.
Something in the air, and it's politics.
Girls' State is like high school teenage girls who care about government.
Are you friends?
No, we'll become friends.
Yeah, obviously.
In 2040, I intend to run for president. So I think at Girls' State, I'm going to run for governor.
Attorney General.
Supreme Court Justice.
Okay.
We're never going to get the opportunity to talk to people from different parts of Missouri the way that we are right now.
I am a very social person. I will talk to a wall.
Often when women start talking politics, we get shut down.
But I'm not one to be left on the dust.
We all have, in our own different ways, grown up in a world where we've never seen a female president. But how do we change that? we step up.
This is where it all begins.
We all work very hard on the image of ourselves that we want to show to the world. It's exhausting.
Okay. I know it's a lot of pressure. I can see it. I'm that same person, so breathe.
Good luck. I'll talk to you soon. We are all Americans and we all want the best for this country.
Standing in front of this crowd of future leaders, I can say that God can save the world. Women will save America.
So I had the pleasure of talking to Jesse not too long ago about The Mission when that movie came out, and that was wonderful. One of the things that I had the chance to ask him about was what got him interested in making art, making documentaries, all of that stuff. And since you weren't there, Amanda, I would just start by asking, what is your origin story? How did you get into the filmmaking business?
Well, I did not go to film school, I'll tell you that. I studied anthropology and studio art in college, and when I went into the workforce, I was working in sort of advertising, corporate design, kind of artistic job, but in the corporate world. And we were drawing logos, and one day at a board meeting, everybody was having a passionate debate about Pantone yellows colors, and I just didn't feel it, and I recognized I was not in the right place. I basically was like, where's the people in this story? And ended up like the next day going and signing up for an NYU summer course or something, and then immediately got an internship in a pretty wonderful documentary film company, having not actually seen that many documentaries, to be honest. So I think they asked me at the interview, like, what's your favorite documentary? And I answered the only one I'd ever seen. And it happened to be a really good one, Brother's Keeper, if anybody hasn't seen it. It's
Nice.
a fantastic film. And verite too. And I think that I was always drawn to verite filmmaking. And I think it's kind of the closest to fiction, I guess. And I also went to grad school for creative writing. So for me, it's sort of the closest I can get to that space. That's kind of the long version of the answer.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I was thinking, gosh, if I were sort of tasked with naming a documentary early on and I had to think of one, like there's so few, like Roger and Me would like be like the thing that would pop into mind or something.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Funny is good, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, funny is great. And I think not enough documentaries have, and they can be about very deep and important and painful things, but funny is part of life to me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what I appreciate about the work that you all do, which is, and you hit the nail on the head. It's this curiosity about people. Like, who are these people? What makes them tick? And what makes people sort of unique, And that's absolutely what I appreciated about Boys State. And it definitely comes through again here with Girls State. I guess probably a good place to start is, when did you know that you sort of wanted to do this project? Because it seems like a natural sort of next step after Boys State to look at Girls State as well. So was it while you were filming Boys State originally, or did you sort of have an inkling for this project after seeing that movie come out and wondering what the other side of the story was?
Actually, the seeds for this project were planted before we ever shot Boys State. We were actually talking to Texas Girls State in development, and we couldn't get a friendly response from them. So we ended up with the Boys State program, which was very receptive. But the project for us was beyond boys. It was young people in this experience, and what we glean from that about boyhood, girlhood, and our political future, both, and coming of age politically. And so I think the success of Boys State allowed us to sort of actualize that dream of making a companion film. And also it was daunting to make a sequel. Well, we had to consider it a sibling, not a sequel. That was important for us to give ourselves permission to fail, which seemed like a likely prospect because so much is left to chance in cinema verite. So we had to wait a while through COVID, but there was really a will to do it. There was a clear why. But sort of everything had to kind of fall into place before we could actually try to make it. And I'd say the big factor was like, we could have just walked away, frankly, because Boys State could just kind of live on its own.
No.
But we have two teenage daughters.
We have two teenage daughters. I think it's really something that just is, yeah. I think also there were seeds of it, even in watching in Boys State when the boys of course, abortion as a sort of a hot button topic in politics would come up, and it would be very awkwardly, to their credit, the boys would not really want to get into it because there's no girls in the room. So most of the debate, well, there was many issues that were brought up, but guns was really the big one at that session in Texas. But I knew that in those moments, I was like, wow, it'd be really interesting. I wonder what Girl State's doing with abortion right now, like as a conversation. And then, of course, as the years as that topic has become even more of a part of our discussion, it made it feel like we just had to go to a Girl State.
Yeah, I mean, you also had the benefit, the
I know,
coincidence, I guess. I mean, it's hard to say the coincidence of the Dobbs leak coming out at the same time that you're filming. So it seems like a natural sort of entree into this world as far as like thinking through issues that affect women and women's bodies and who makes those decisions and stuff. I would be curious, just from a production standpoint, since you already have Boys State under your belt, like, were you anticipating that you would get real honesty from the folks that were participating in the doc, or are they sort of mirroring their behavior off of what they expect from Boys State?
It was a different dynamic because we could share the film with these kids while we were talking to, we spent months casting for this film because the session is lightning speed. You can't really like stop and figure out who you're going to focus on while it's happening. So in the many months of casting and talking to hundreds of kids, part of our job is to find the right kids, by the way, who not only want to be in the film, but understand what the film is and also are the right people for us in that they're confident in who they are and they are vulnerable enough to share their feelings with us. Like, that's a really interesting kid who can be both smart enough to do well in the program and know enough about politics and passionate enough about all of this to really engage us intellectually, but also open enough to be sharing all that with us on camera. But I think in part of choosing who we follow, we're also looking for who's self-conscious, who's too self-conscious in front of the camera. And that's a sizable chunk of teenagers, frankly, particularly now, because this group, the Gen Z, they have their phones in their hands all the time. And they are used to filming things and being filmed and TikToking and snapping and all this stuff. So there's an added layer to sort of self-image that you have to be pretty aware of. Is there anything you want to add to that? But of course, you're always looking for authenticity, and that's part of our job. Like, we have to ferret out real from unreal. And of course, it's a simulation of a political contest. So there's
part of it's an act already.
Right. And same with any interaction, frankly, as a teenager, you're always kind of doing that. But there's real moments of emotion, and you can feel it.
Yeah. I tend to think like you can front for the camera, and people can sort of, people can act in a certain way, and that's okay. You can have a great subject who, like, over emotes, but it's your job to kind of recognize when they're doing that, and then to carefully modulate that in the film, because the audience will perceive that too, and you can lose people, this was less of a factor here. But I would just add, like, Emily, who's our conservative protagonist, wanted to reach out to Ben, who's our conservative protagonist in Boys State, and I think to ask, what was the experience like for you? These filmmakers, they don't share my politics. Like, how did they treat you? And I didn't, I just said, here, we love Ben, give Ben a call. He has complicated feelings about the film, but I think he loved the film too. And so that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I mean, I've been working with teenagers for almost 15 years now. They're constantly sort of questioning themselves. And that's one of the things that I really appreciated about your film is that Emily, she's constantly calling herself a conservative and checking herself against other people almost as a way of reinforcing that she is who she thinks she is, It's this is constant sort of check-in. But a similar thing is happening with Toshi and like her, her identification with race and the fact that she's like one of few Black people that are participating in this program, and even Brooke, someone who on the surface seems like she's 1,000% confident, and then you get her in that interview with Nisha, and she admits to her vulnerabilities and her questioning of the self. Yeah, I guess. I don't know I think you've already answered that question, but yeah, this idea of who are you? Are you sort of a performance that you put on for everybody else, or are you, your essential self, and how do you find that, in the midst of a documentary? Yeah.
Well, that's the work of so much cinema verite too. But I think what, this age is interesting because they are transforming, and someone like Emily, who is able to be very perceptive about the world around her, but also self-questioning, is a very important combination for us to connect with her, even if we don't, even if we have to kind of overcome the resistance of not agreeing with her politics. And I think that she rewards that faith on our part because we discover, if we don't agree politically with her, that actually there's something that we really admire about her. One is she's honest with herself and she risks failure and grows from that experience. But more maybe fundamentally, she begins to question the program and the structural inequalities that exist. And and she doesn't start that way in the week. And I think great documentaries, verite films, require you meeting people right at or just before a transformative moment in their lives. And you can't kind of will that into being. But with Emily, the program, herself, and I think her politics are in flux to some degree. And that's okay. Like, who should be fixed at the age of 17? In casting, we used to ask these kids, tell me about an issue in which you changed your mind. And because I think that's interesting for all of us to think about. Like, I find myself engaged in a conversation privately with myself about Israel and the Palestinians, because I'm trying to work through it. And certainly we shouldn't expect people to show up with fully formed politics, and probably at any age, it's not okay. And so,
well, that's right. We had a really interesting conversation with Ben, who changed his mind about unions.
Yeah. So I love that Emily really comes to know thyself in this film. And that is amazing to watch, I think.
Yeah, there's two major things that I wanted to touch on, and I know that my time is starting to get a little limited, but this idea of Emily's growth and this sort of this almost like investigative journalism that she gets into, and like at the end of the week, like she has limited amount of time to sort of suss all of this stuff out and get it written down, and submitted to the paper and stuff about the inequality between boys state and girls state as far as funding and programs and stuff. It just lends itself to a question about sort of feminism as it's been sort of, I think it's a conversation that's been picked up since the Dobbs leak, but also, just going through last year with in pop culture with the Barbie cycle and stuff like that. And now we have your movie to sort of have this generation process, like, what are their thoughts as far as, this idea of feminism goes and how they're able to articulate it. I mean, there's a good deal of sort of, I guess, spoken empowerment that's part of the Girl State, like, keynotes and stuff like that. But is there actual empowerment happening? And are the participants in the program sort of able to articulate, like, what the difference is between what they would like from the experience and what the actual experience is, as far as that goes?
Yeah. Wow. There's so much in
I know.
that Question, how much time? We like 30 seconds. I mean, first of all, you said the F word. That is like, to me, that is one of those incredible, those words. There's some words where meaning is just like all over the place. And I think I was just reading something where I've been watching Veep and Julia, what's her name?
Louis Dreyfus.
Like she just literally in some papers was saying like, we need to de-stinkify the word feminism because it has this, a little bit like environmentalism had in the 90s. It felt very much like ew. Why does it have that negative energy? Because in fact, it's such a positive thing. So what does Gen Z feel about all of that? And in our sort of limited view of, right, the sample size of 2 of our kids, but also who are teenage girls, but also this group of girls in Missouri in 2022, I would say that they are not naive about the limitations they face, but they also have this kind of fresh energy and a recognition of the sort of failed and unhealthy politics of adult state. And that includes these kind of fluffy female empowerment, kind of coffee mug, rah things, right? But also, they're a little younger to not even remember the Women's March after Trump got elected, right? And that was a powerful feeling for women in America. But then that was, it's how many years ago was that?
8 years.
8, right? That matters, right? And then that's gone. And what's now? And so the what now piece of it, I feel good when I hang out with 17-year-olds because they're sort of experiencing everything I know too, but they have this new vibe to them, which is we're not satisfied with just sitting around in a room and like hearing the crown speech. Like we know we have this in common. And now we know we have this major fight, right? Especially in Missouri, where you cannot get an abortion. It is illegal unless you go to court and argue your case that you need one and that they gift it to you. So that's the reality of being a girl in that state right now. That's a whole new batch of they have less rights than I did. And that wave, I guess, if we're in another wave, is new and exciting, I think, in terms of the potential for harnessing their energies.
I like what CC says in the film that Girl is Elected Governor, and she says of the program, but I think she could be speaking largely of our society. It shouldn't be conditioning women for sexism. It should be, helping women combat or training them to combat sexism. And sure, that's a critique of the program. But the program actually does empower them. And I think it does both. And I think we as a society do both. And I think it's, as a man, it's kind of shocking. It shouldn't have been to actually see Emily uncover the fact
that's what I meant to say.
The program has this disparity with the men's program. Like, why is that okay? Why is it okay that the governor of Missouri swears in the boy state governor, but not the girls? It's just like, I think there's a kind of invisibility made visible, but it's powerful because it's through their eyes and it's not prescriptive, to sort of what you were saying about environmentalism or feminism. It sort of sounds like you've got to take this bitter pill. And I think this sort of sneak attack of the film is that it comes in this sort of, funny and entertaining package, but it packs a punch. I think.
Well, the very fact that Emily, I mean, she's already activated. I mean, this is her activism. She's already doing it within the girl state. She's already taking it down by her kind of journalism piece. So that's exciting to watch, the kind of energized.
Yeah, I was thinking also, Faith articulates this pretty well too, when, especially when she sees Cecilia's speech and she's like, oh, I've lost. Okay. But it's like, it's this idea of like, she gives voice to this idea of, we can actually work. We can actually do the work. You're talking about empowerment. So empower us to actually act, and I think that's great. And that's a benefit of this program, is saying you can do this work, get out there and do the work. Right. I just have one last thing, and I've got like 2 minutes to talk about. So, and that's, the wonderful gift of Boys State was really putting its finger on this. What would you call it? Like a gamification of politics. This idea that politics isn't about ideas. It's about winning. It's about strategy. Did you see that sort of happening again here with Girls State? Is this like an irreversible state of politics in this country, or is is this what it is now? It's just about trying to control all the monopoly territories.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem clearly that the drift, the further drift since even Boys State and Ben kind of internalizing Trumpian politics of like whatever it takes to win. All that matters is winning. It's a kind of binary, you lose, I win. And we see where that gets us. Not a good place. I think, I think the girls don't practice that. I don't think, they're competitive. They're intensely competitive, right? And they're driven. They certainly didn't manifest the mean girls kind of behavior that people suspected we would encounter. Maybe, I'm not sure we did, but other people seem to kind of fall into that trope. And it does seem a kind of gravitational force that's hard to extricate yourself from, and because it's all around you now. Trump's rhetoric, the kind of corrosive politics of now. So I think, but somehow they manage to. I mean, what I've come to feel is like they do imagine a different kind of politics, and it might just be 17-year-old girls in a packed government in the state of Missouri. But I feel like we collectively need to visualize it, to imagine it before we can realize it. And we, because we all know if we stay on the current course we're on, where that leads.
Entertainment and politics has been a thing, I think, always, right? And anybody who's running for governor in boys or girls state programs or in real life is going to use that to their advantage. And generally wonkier people who are not as charismatic don't get elected in those positions. It is a popularity contest on some level. And we watch in our film, as in our last film, candidates who kind of play differently in how they strategize to get elected. And one of them, who is a natural at standing on a chair in the middle of a cafeteria of 500 people, and just like speaking her mind, like that's not everybody. And that just comes to her naturally. And so she's a natural candidate for governor, regardless of what she says in her speech. So entertainment, I think, you obviously have a lot of outlets for that now, maybe more than back in whatever Andrew Jackson's day. But how much like the strong man thing is playing into that in our country, but also worldwide, like strongman leadership, and how effective that is at chaos and war and division. That's the part that was interesting to really see the counter programming of an all-girls state, where you really did see, I haven't taken a lot of gender studies classes, but I do remember that there's sort of some of these ideas behind sort of like women are more invested in ethics of care and like relationship building. And, that's kind of, it's hard to not look at all of what they were doing in that way of, for instance, right before the Supreme Court, all the Supreme Court justices hold hands and kind of give each other affirmations. I just don't see that happening at Boys State. And mind you, all these girls were very competitive with one another. It's not that they're not going to go out and try and get their questions heard and, the whole thing. But it's just, are you okay? And I think there's a recognition of also like, we are all girls experiencing a limitation in representation of political power in this country and maybe in worldwide, right? So we have that in common. We all want to push against that. And that commonality is also something they see in knowing that each of them kind of is very hard on themselves and the care that they feel for one another. You see that in one of the scenes where one of our kids loses and another girl who was competing against her comes up and is like, are you okay? Like, I see you. I'm as hard as myself as you are. And I'm sure some boys do that too. But
Stephen gets that in Boys
Stephen
State.
gets that. Yeah. There's a lot of care there. And I think that's the stuff we need to lean into. And maybe 17s they're like, they're kind of puppies still. So they're like showing that vulnerability in a way that we all recognize.
Well, speaking of games, my time is unfortunately I've monopolized all the possible time that I can with you guys. So thank you so much. I love Boys State. I love this. I've already been talking to folks about this movie to go watch it, go find it wherever they can, in theaters, online, wherever it's available. So congratulations on this film, and thank you so much for your time here today.
Thanks, Greg. Love your questions.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.